the storm is on its way. Florida starting to feel it now in a very, very significant way. The Florida governor, Rick Scott, who has, according to news reports, barred or banned his staff members and state employees from using the phrases climate change or global warming, is telling people this storm will kill you. Yeah. So Rick Scott is suddenly concerned about human life after he refused to expand Medicare in the state of Florida, so that Charlene Dill, mother of two or three, in her 30s with a heart condition, because who was working a couple of jobs while she was trying to raise her kids. She had a heart condition. She couldn't afford to pay for the medication because she had no insurance, because Rick Scott would not expand Medicaid, and she did not make enough to qualify for subsidies under Obamacare. She died. Charlene Dill's blood are on the hands of Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, and now he's saying to people, run, right? Because the storm is coming and it might injure you, and if you get injured and you're low income, screw you, we're not going to pay for any of your health care, says Rick Scott, effectively through his actions. So since, particularly if you make less than, $20-some-odd thousand a year and you don't qualify for Medicaid, well, you don't qualify because Rick Scott has refused to let the money into the state of Florida. This is federal money. Here, free. We'll cover all your poor people in Florida. We're not just poor. I mean, low-income working people. You've got to be a working person to qualify for the Medicaid expansion. I mean, if you're absolutely unemployed, there's already a very, very slim kind of bottom of Medicaid provided by the state of Florida that goes back to, the 60s when LBJ created Medicaid. But if you earn, enough money that if you're working, but you're not, Rick Scott says, no, you can't have health care. Hurricane's coming. Look out. But if you get injured, tough luck. If you get injured, show up at an emergency room, get the $5,000 bill, pay for it the rest of your life. Good luck, Charlie. Can you believe this? This guy is suddenly concerned about human life. These Republicans are such hypocrites. I mean, it is mind-boggling, the hypocrisy. And of course, if you're in Florida, if you're in the path of this storm, get the hell out of the way, health insurance or not. I mean, that's just, obviously a very straightforward thing. But it also raises an interesting point and question. There's an amazing piece of reporting done by The Guardian, Oliver Millman in New York, based on a new paper that was just released by James Hansen. Remember James Hansen? James Hansen was the head climate guy for NASA, senior scientist with NASA. Actually, I'm not sure he was the head climate guy. I don't remember what his title was, but he was like one of the senior scientists at NASA. And he is a climate scientist. And he just submitted a new paper along with 11 other experts. Now, this has not yet been peer-reviewed, but they just submitted it for peer review, saying that the temperature this year, we're not talking 2020, 2050, 2100. I mean, remember 5-10 years ago, it was all like, oh my God, where's the world going to be in 2100? I don't care, I'll be dead, was the response of most people. This is 2016. This year, right now. Oliver Millman in New York writes for The Guardian, the global temperature has increased to a level not seen in 115,000 years. Now, 115,000 years ago, all of us were living in East Central Africa. I mean, some of us might have migrated to other parts of Africa, but that was pretty much it. The great migrations out of Africa had not yet even begun. And the sea levels were 20 to 30 feet higher than today. A new paper submitted by James Hansen, a former NASA senior NASA climate scientist, and 11 other experts states that the 2016 temperature is likely to be 1.25 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. This rate of warming is bringing Earth in line with temperatures last seen in the Eemian period, an interglacial era ending 115,000 years ago, when there was much less ice and sea level was 6 to 9 meters, 20 to 30 feet higher than today. It was published, or it was submitted to a discussion as a discussion paper to Earth System Dynamics, which is a scientific journal. So it's like, how quickly will the ice in Greenland and Antarctica melt to take us to where we were during the Eemian, now that we're at that temperature? But beyond that, the oceans are warmer. There's 6% more moisture in the atmosphere. Moisture, by the way, water vapor, is a powerful greenhouse gas, more powerful than carbon dioxide. There's 6% more of it in the atmosphere now than there was in 1980. We don't know how much there was in 1850, you know, when the industrial era began, but there's 6% more than in 1980. And the oceans are warmer. So you could, and I am, say that every storm, the tornado you had down the street last week, the whopper thunderstorm that you had the week before last, that just seemed, wow, that really seemed intense, is a global climate change, a global warming phenomena. Now, I realize we've always had hurricanes, we've always had tornadoes, we've always had thunderstorms. You know, I've lived through a lot of them in my life, as have all of us. But, you know, now we're seeing, I mean, literally, we're seeing 1,000-year events happening once a year. 1 in 1,000-year events. I mean, South Carolina just had, you know, last year had a 1 in 1,000-year flooding event. Why? Because there's 6% more moisture in the atmosphere. More moisture in the atmosphere, that represents energy, and it also represents mass. It represents water. So why is it Louisiana got wiped out with a 1,000-year flooding event a couple of weeks ago? The Congress just had to appropriate billions of dollars for, or hundreds of millions. I forget the appropriation amount, but, you know, lots and lots of money for. Because there's more moisture in the atmosphere. This is not rocket science. This is atmospheric science. Every storm now is a climate change event, or has been affected by climate change. It might only make it 1% worse, might make it 5% worse, might make it 30% worse. I mean, you know, it's going to depend on the conditions, but particularly any storms coming off the oceans, which are warmer now. Keep in mind, 90% of the CO2 that's been emitted by us on the planet has been, well, depending on whose numbers you're looking at, somewhere between 2/3 and 90% is going into the oceans, acidifying the oceans. But along with that, I believe it's between 2/3 and 90% of the heat is going into the oceans. I don't have the direct numbers right in front of me. I've quoted them before, but I run this stuff from memory at my own risk, I realize. But here we are. And you know, meanwhile, it's coming. So when do weather forecasters start pointing out that, you know, this is much worse because there's more heat in the ocean and there's more moisture in the atmosphere. So expect this storm to be worse than it would normally be. Expect every storm to be worse than it would normally be, because our atmosphere is not the same as it was if you were, you know, born in 1980. It's not the same as when you were born.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Pretty much any time when you were born. I mean, this is starting to increase really, really rapidly. We'll be back.